Good day, friends. Welcome once again to our series. Today we're going to shift gears somewhat and we're going to speak about science and the Bible.
Today's topic is Darwin's dilemma. Can a scientific mind believe the Bible? This is a two-part series, and today we want to address the question, can order and complexity come from nothing?
Friends, wherever you go today, you will see the influence of the evolution theory. When you visit the museums, everything is interpreted in this light. If you're studying biology at university or college, everything is presented in the light of the evolutionary theory. When you watch a TV program on nature, once again, everything is presented from an evolutionary perspective. The prevailing philosophy dominating our scientific and educational institutions today is humanistic, mechanistic, naturalistic, and materialistic. But when a scientist tries to explain how life arose, he is stepping beyond the bounds of empirical science, as there were no human witnesses to those events. Both creation and evolution are inferences based upon circumstantial evidence. But that evidence, I believe, is overwhelmingly in favor of creation. And so I would like to present the scientific evidence that has convinced me that creation is a better model than evolution. Charles Darwin introduced a whole new paradigm shift when he wrote his book, The Origin of the Species. Charles Darwin sailed aboard the Beagle and visited various islands around the world. And when he came to the Galapagos Islands, which are situated off the west coast of South America, he was staggered by the diversity of life. As he visited these islands, he found giant tortoises, strange iguanas, and a huge variety of finches. And this got him thinking, surely God did not create every single species. Evolution must have taken place. And so Charles Darwin began to promote a radically different view of origins. If we look at Sir Julian Huxley, Darwin's bulldog, he had this to say about the theory of evolution. Evolution, in the extended sense, can be defined as a directional and essentially irreversible process occurring in time, which in its course gives rise to an increase of variety and an increasingly high level of organization in its products. Our present knowledge indeed forces us to view that the whole of reality is evolution, a single process of self-transformation. Please notice, evolution is a directional process. It is irreversible. It leads to an increase of variety and an increasingly higher level of organization. And it is self-transformational. There is no need of God. So where did we come from? The evolutionist would say that originally we came from a single-celled organism, something like amoeba. Were we once a tiny tadpole or a fish that climbed out of a pond millions of years ago? The scientists will tell us that life has evolved over a period of 3,000 million years. And eventually, the apes arose and the apes evolved into man. Can we as Christians really believe what the Bible teaches about the origin of life? Well, friends, most scientists today are evolutionists, but the number of creationists is growing. And some very, very good books have been written on this subject. For example, Michael Denton, Evolution, a Theory in Crisis. Philip Johnson has written the book Darwin on Trial. The Fingerprint of God, written by Dr. Hugh Ross, an astronomer. The Great Evolution Mystery by Gordon Rattray Taylor. Darwin's Doubt by Stephen Meyer. Origin by Design by Harold Coffin, Robert Brown, and James Gibson. Signature in the Cell by Stephen Meyer. And Origins, Linking Science and Scripture by Ariel A. Roth. So the number of scientists believing in intelligent design is growing. Let us have a look at some of the evidences for creation. Firstly, let us look at the order, complexity, and the miracle of life itself. Most scientists today believe in the Big Bang Theory, but there are some who do not accept it. But the point is that there was a beginning. Something started it all. Now, according to Professor Stephen Hawkins, the universe is incredibly fine-tuned. Conditions allowing for the creation of the universe occur only when certain physical constants lie within a very, very narrow range of values. If any of the several fundamental constants were just slightly different, matter, the diversity of elements, stars and planets, as well as life, would not have been able to develop in the universe. And so for the universe to begin, the constants had to be in place. Everything had to be fine-tuned. Here we see the Hubble telescope, a few hundred kilometers above our Earth. This telescope has been sending amazing photographs of our universe back to us here on planet Earth. When we look at the book of Psalms, David said of God, "By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, the starry host by the breath of his mouth." God spoke, and everything came into being. Evolutionists, however, give all the credit to hydrogen gas and pure chance. Here we see the Andromeda galaxy, about 2 million light years away from Earth. Now, light travels at the speed of about 300,000 kilometers per second. That's 7 times around the equator of the Earth in 1 second. Putting it another way, light travels 9.4 trillion kilometers in 1 year. Here is our Milky Way galaxy as seen from planet Earth. Dr. David Bloch, an astronomer at Wits University, said that if we had to count all the stars in our Milky Way galaxy, 1 per second, it would take 2,500 years to count them all. And that, friends, is just our Milky Way galaxy. What about all the other galaxies out there? There are more than 100 billion galaxies in the known universe. And here we see one of them. But if you look carefully, top left, there's another galaxy with about 100 billion stars. And bottom right, there's another galaxy with another 100 billion stars. Friends, where do you stop when you start talking about figures like this? The prophet Isaiah says, "To whom will you compare me? And who is my equal?" says the Holy One. "Lift your eyes to the heavens. Who created all these? He who leads forth the starry host one by one and calls them each by name. Because of his mighty strength and great power, not one of them is missing." Friends, here is an artist's depiction of our Milky Way galaxy. It is a barred spiral galaxy. The scientists tell us that this galaxy of ours is 100,000 light years from one side to the other. That means that light traveling 9.4 trillion kilometers in 1 year would take 100,000 years to move from one side of this galaxy to the other. Friends, this arrow shows more or less where we are situated. in our galaxy. Now, on this scale, planet Earth, in fact, our whole solar system, is so small that you can't even see it. It is smaller than a pinpoint. Our Earth is very, very small compared to the rest of our galaxy. Here is the size of our Earth in relation to our Sun. When the spacecraft, the Viking, was moving out of our solar system, it had passed the giant gas planets Jupiter and Saturn. The scientists wanted it to turn around one more time and take a picture of planet Earth. It was now 5.9 billion kilometers away from Earth. And so they turned it around, and it took a series of snapshots of our planet. And this is what was sent back to Earth. You can see a number of sunbeams here. These were reflections off the surface of the spacecraft. But can you see planet Earth there? There it is. Let's magnify that a little bit. There is our Earth, a small speck of dust. The famous astronomer Dr. Carl Sagan said, and this is a very famous quote of his, "Our planet, a speck of dust suspended in a sunbeam." Yes, friends, we are very, very small in this vast universe. And I don't know about you, but it makes me feel small. And I realize how great and big our God is. Bernard de Fontenelles said, and I quote, "Behold a universe so immense that I am lost in it. I no longer know where I am. I am just nothing at all. Our world is terrifying in its insignificance." And despite the fact that we are so small in our universe, this little planet of ours has been perfectly designed for life. The Bible says that God spoke and everything came into being. Psalm 33 verse 9, "For he spoke and it was done. He commanded and it stood fast." Some astronomers are now speaking about a multiverse in which there could possibly be a number of universes. We are just one of those universes. And here this artist has represented the different universes as little bubbles, each with billions of stars and galaxies in it. Our friends, God is big. We know very, very little, but He has created everything according to the Word of God. Here we see our planet. Notice this thin blue line that surrounds our planet, which we call the biosphere. The biosphere is only 60 kilometers high. But friends, all life that we know about is found in that thin blue line. Man has visited other planets, sent probes, for example, to Mars. These robots have analyzed the atmosphere, they have looked at rock samples, they have taken soil samples, and no life has been found on Mars. Mars is a cold, hostile, sterile planet. And yet, its closest neighbor teems with life, with color, with variety and beauty. And everything is kept in balance. The gases on our planet are kept in balance. There are wonderful ecological cycles in place. The plants produce oxygen, which the animals breathe in. The animals breathe out carbon dioxide, which the plants use for photosynthesis. Everything is balanced and fine-tuned. Let us look at the wonder of some of God's creation. Here is a little honeybee. This is an amazing little creature. Here we see honeybees at their hive. Just look at that honeycomb that they have built. Perfect symmetry. Who taught them to do that? After all, these little creatures don't even have a brain. They just have a concentration of nerve cells called ganglia. It is amazing to think about what they are able to do. These bees are even able to communicate with one another. Here we see the famous waggle dance, which communicates the distance and the direction and the quality of the food source to the other worker bees. Friends, how are these little creatures able to do this? Who taught them to navigate by the sun? And then the wing of an insect is a superbly designed flying tool, capable of very strong sculling action. Wing movement in insects is very, very complex, consisting of elevation and depression, fore and aft movement, pronation and supination, and changes in shape by folding and buckling. Now, the honeybee could not function in its hive with large wings, so it has to have small wings. But the reduced wing area is compensated for by a very rapid wing beat, over 200 beats per second. The honeybee is a true engineering marvel, which displays the glory, wisdom, and creative power of God. And then, friends, there is the wonderful mystery of flight. Have you ever wished that you could fly? Here we see contour feathers, beautifully designed. Now, contour feathers are both light, yet they are extremely strong to produce a fantastic aerofoil system. What is more, the bird has special bones, porous bones, which makes the bones light. And the feathers are superbly designed for flight. If we had to look at a feather under the microscope, we'll see that they are consisting of shafts and barbs and barbules all interlocking, making a flat aerofoil surface strong but light. Let's have a look at a true little wonder, the hummingbird. The hummingbird is the smallest bird in the world. The smallest species is only 5.2 centimeters in length. This will give you an idea of how tiny these little birds are. Their wings can flap 50 to 60 beats per second and up to 200 beats per second during mating. Their wings are able to move in a figure-8 motion, a trait unique to hummingbirds. This unique ability allows them to hover precisely in one position, to fly backwards or take off vertically. They generate lift with both forward and backward motions. The ultra-flexibility of the shoulder joint is a unique design, allowing the wing to twist into extreme positions not found in other birds. However, unlike other birds, the elbow and wrist joints are rigid, making the wing more like a stiff paddle. The huge breast muscles represent a massive 40% of the bird's total weight. Millions of dollars have been unsuccessfully invested in engineering attempts to duplicate this complex system of biomechanical wonders. The metabolism of the hummingbird is the highest among all vertebrates and requires huge amounts of fuel. And this is why the hummingbird has to feed for most of the day, seeking out nectar in the flowers. Their heart rate can exceed 1,250 beats per minute during flight, and they can take up to 250 breaths per minute during flight. What is more, they have a micro-pump tongue that can lap up nectar at the rate of 13 licks per second. Friends, I would like to show you a video just to show you the wonder of flight in the hummingbird, and also to show you the wonder of this micro-pump tongue that it is able to use to suck up the nectar.
The hummingbird's tongue is about twice as long as its beak, so it can reach deep into a flower. And until recently, many scientists believed that the birds relied heavily on capillary action to draw the nectar through their tongues and into their mouths. Kind of like water spontaneously rising up a thin straw in a glass. But some fascinating discoveries at the University of Connecticut have shown that the mechanisms involved are much more dynamic than anyone realized.
The hummingbird's tongue is actually a nectar trap, equipped with a pair of narrow tubes that taper sharply. The tip of each tube is segmented into a row of flaps that are attached to a supporting rod. When the bird isn't eating, these flaps form two rows of closed loops that fit compactly into the beak. But when the hummingbird feeds, its tongue undergoes a dramatic transformation. Inside the flower, the tongue extends to make contact with the nectar. When immersed in fluid, the tip splits and the flaps on each fork systematically unfurl. Then, as the tongue is withdrawn, the flaps close tightly to seal and capture the nectar for delivery into the bird's mouth. This entire process is executed automatically in less than a 20th of a second, thousands of times a day.
From flower to flower to flower to flower, this brilliant iridescent body, there's a kind of jewel-like quality that they have. This exquisite workmanship, the colors and the sound that they make. I think in some respects, the wonder of a hummingbird almost transcends language. And we respond to what we see at a level really, you could say, deeper than rationality. I mean, it's not irrational, but it's almost like responding to the work of an artist. And at that level, we respond with our soul, with our emotions. What can you say? Words can't do it justice, so you just stand there and applaud.
The hummingbird is another engineering marvel which displays God's glory, His wisdom, and awesome creative power. And then, friends, we have the wonder of bird migration. Birds are able to migrate from one country, for example, from South Africa, up to Europe, and then migrate back down again to the exact position from which they came. How is this possible? How are they able to navigate in this way by using the stars and the sun? They have such small brains. Who built that into their genetic makeup? Migration is truly a wonder. Imagine the first migrator. How was he able to find his way from South Africa to England, let's say, and then back again to the same place from which he came? As this little cartoon says, why didn't we just stay where we were and evolve into penguins? Navigation and migration is truly a wonder. Take, for example, the cockpit of a Boeing or any large aircraft. The navigation instruments are incredibly complex, and here this little bird is able to find its way, navigate across the seas, and find its way back again. Then we have the wonder of the development of a new life. It is truly a miracle, the way the cells grow, multiply, and differentiate to form the different organs in the body. And as any parent knows, at the birth of a child, we stand back in awe at this wonderful, incredible miracle of life. Our bodies consist of more than 30 trillion cells. We have more than 12 billion brain cells with over 100 trillion connections. Friends, God has created the most complex computer of all, the human brain. And the wonder of it all is that 75% of it is just water. The rest is made up of proteins, fats, and other substances. How do we account for all this order and complexity that we see in the universe? John Bunyan once spoke about a person who was stranded on a small island. He thought he was the only person on that island. But the next morning, as he got up and he walked down to the beach, he saw a set of footprints. And instantaneously he knew that he was not alone. This was evidence of another human being. In his book, Does God Exist?, he says, if one print of a bare foot in the sand is absolute proof of the existence and presence of a human being, what are we to think when we see the prints of the master shoes, as John Bunyan calls them, covering the whole world? Friends, when I look at a watch, I know that that watch did not come about by chance. Somebody designed that watch. And Paul tells us in the book of Hebrews, chapter 3, verse 4, he says, every house is built by someone, but God is the builder of everything. Alan Sandage, a very famous astronomer, one of the fathers of modern astronomy, the scientist who discovered quasars, said the following, I find it quite improbable that such order came out of chaos. There has to be some organizing principle. God to me is a mystery, but He is the explanation for the miracle of existence. Why there is something rather than nothing. In Romans 1 verse 20 we read, His eternal power and deity has been clearly perceived in the things that have been made. The second line of evidence that I would like to examine is the second law of thermodynamics, or the law of entropy. The law of entropy states that everything in our universe is deteriorating, slowly breaking down and decaying. The second law of thermodynamics states all systems move from a state of order to disorder. So we are moving from order to disorder, from complex to simple, because things are slowly disintegrating and breaking down. Everything is degenerating, becoming more disorderly. So, for example, a car with time will eventually rust and fall to pieces. Everywhere we look, we see deterioration and decay. Even our bodies are slowly breaking down. If we move into a room, like our children's room, things rapidly move from order to disorder. Dr. Isaac Asimov, a very well-known and respected scientist, said the following, the universe is constantly becoming more disorderly. Viewed that way, we can see the second law all about us. We have to work hard to straighten a room, but left to itself, it becomes a mess again, very quickly and very easily. Even if we never enter it, it becomes dusty and musty. How difficult to maintain houses and machinery and our own bodies in perfect working order. How easy to let them deteriorate. In fact, all we have to do is nothing, and everything deteriorates, collapses, breaks down, wears out, all by itself. And that is what the second law of thermodynamics is all about. Friends, the law of entropy applies to both closed and open systems. The second law of thermodynamics is the death knell to the theory of evolution. Evolutionists don't like speaking about it because it destroys their system. A third line of evidence is mathematical probability. There are only two alternatives. Either things were created by God, carefully designed by Him, or everything came about by chance. Let me ask you a question. How many atoms are there in the entire universe? Well, scientists estimate that we have 10 to the power of 78 atoms. Now, friends, that is an enormously large number. What is the probability that if we place a bomb under a pile of logs and the bomb explodes, that those logs would eventually fall down and form a house? Well, scientists tell us that the probability of that happening is 10 to the power of 80, which is even a larger number than the number of atoms in the universe. Friends, that will never happen. The probability is, for all intents and purposes, 0. Well, when we come to the primordial earth, scientists believe that our seas were like a soup. There were mixtures of compounds, and slowly but surely the molecules that form life, building blocks of life, came together. And some of these molecules are extremely large, made up of many, many different kinds of atoms. What is the probability of this happening, of these molecules coming together by chance? Let's have a look at an example. All proteins are made up of units called amino acids. Now, there are 20 amino acids in nature, and these amino acids come together to form chains, which we call proteins. It's very much like the letters of an alphabet. We have 26 different letters, and the way we arrange those letters will make up sentences that have meaning. Likewise, these amino acids have to come together in a specific sequence in order for the protein to function properly. Here we see the amino acid glycine. Here is alanine, and here is the amino acid cysteine. Just 3 of the 20 amino acids. In a large protein like this, there would be hundreds and hundreds of amino acids, all in a specific sequence. If just one amino acid is out of place, that protein would not be able to function properly. Here we have the amino acid sequence in one of the smallest proteins called ribonuclease. This is an enzyme. All enzymes are proteins. Ribonuclease is an enzyme that is found in our digestive tract. The ribonuclease molecule has 124 amino acids. And here we see the sequence of those amino acids. And they have to be in the correct sequence, otherwise this molecule would not be able to function. How did this precise arrangement come into being? The evolutionist would say, pure chance. What other alternative does he have? There were no organic chemists on the earth at that time, and they don't believe in God, so it must have been by pure chance. Well, what is the probability that all 124 amino acids will be able to link up correctly in the correct sequence? Let's have a look. There are 20 amino acids. So what is the probability that the first 2 would be linked in the correct sequence? Well, that would be 1 over 20 times 1 over 20, which will be 1 out of 400. What is the probability that 3 would link together in the correct sequence? That would be 1 over 20 times 1 over 20 times 1 over 20. The probability is 1 in 8,000. What is the probability of 4 linking together in the correct sequence? It would be 1 in 160,000. What about 5 amino acids? The probability is 1 in 3,200,000. What about 6 amino acids? The probability is 1 in 64 million. Can you see how the probability is increasing exponentially? What is the probability that all 124 amino acids would link together in the correct sequence? Friends, that number is so inconceivably large that it is virtually 0. There is no probability that such a sequence would take place purely by chance. It is like us going down to the beach and marking just 1 grain of sand and then blindfolding someone and asking him to walk up and down this 2-kilometer beach, to bend down, pick up a grain of sand, and that grain of sand must be the marked grain of sand first time around. The chance or probability is virtually 0 that that would happen. But let's say, by chance, it did happen. What would we have? We would have just 1 molecule of ribonuclease. Friends, we need millions of molecules of ribonuclease. We also need millions of molecules of all the other proteins and enzymes and organic molecules. Here we see, for example, the hemoglobin molecule. The hemoglobin molecule has 600 amino acids linked together in a specific sequence. Here we see also the heme groups and the twisting and folding of this polypeptide chain. This is a highly complex protein molecule. What is the chance that 600 amino acids came together purely by chance? Once again, friends, that probability is virtually zero. Or what about the DNA molecule with the billions of base pairs all in a specific sequence? And friends, even if we did have all these molecules floating around in the sea, we still don't have a human cell. A human cell is more than just a bag of chemicals. It is a highly, highly complex system. It has complex membranes. It has specialized energy factories called mitochondria. It has specialized protein factories, the ribosomes. It has the nucleus and nucleolus. This is a highly, highly organized system. There is no ways that a cell could have come about by chance. Professor Sir Fred Hoyle, Britain's foremost astronomer at one time, and Professor Wickramasinghe, Professor of Applied Mathematics at Cardiff University, decided to work out the probability of life arising spontaneously somewhere in our universe. They looked at the minimum requirements for the first living cell and then calculated the probability of this happening on our planet in a time span of 5 billion years. And so they made their calculations. And the Daily Express of London in 1981, August 13, carried this article. Two skeptical scientists put their heads together and reach an amazing conclusion. There must be a God. Two of Britain's most eminent scientists, Professor Fred Hoyle, an agnostic, and Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe, an atheist, have discovered through their research into the origin of life that God exists. I continue reading from this article. From the belief that the notion of a creator is inconsistent with science, each found through independent calculations into the mathematical chances of life starting spontaneously, that the odds against life starting accidentally on earth were staggering, 10 to the power of 40,000. Now, friends, how many atoms did we say are there in our universe? 10 to the power of 78. Here we find that their calculations show that the possibility of life arising spontaneously somewhere in our universe was 10 to the power of 40,000, which is zero. That number is so large, my friends. It is, for all intents and purposes, zero. But they said, let's recalculate. Let's be a little more generous. There are about 100 billion galaxies. Each galaxy has about 100 billion stars. Let us assume that each star has at least one planet like the Earth. Let us further assume that the universe is 20 billion years old. Let's recalculate. Now they're being very generous here, friends. What is the probability that life could have evolved anywhere in the universe in those 20 billion years? Well, they did their calculations. And once again, dear friends, the number was so large that for all intents and purposes, it was zero. The probability, the chance of life arising spontaneously was zero. Wickramasinghe said, for life to have been a chemical accident on Earth is like searching blindfolded for a particular marked grain of sand on all the beaches of the universe and finding it first time around. He went on to say, for life to have happened spontaneously anywhere in the universe is like looking for that marked grain on a single beach, which is still quite unacceptable. Wickramasinghe continued, we realize that the only answer to life is creation and not accidental random shuffling. It is almost inevitable that our own measure of intelligence must reflect higher intelligence, even to the limit of God. And so they came to this amazing conclusion. An agnostic and an atheist come to this conclusion: there must be a God. Professor Fred Hoyle went on to say, the probability of life having arisen spontaneously by evolution is equal to the probability that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard would assemble a Boeing 747. Wickramasinghe said, I had been brainwashed into believing that you could never bring God into science. And Fred Hoyle went on to say, evolutionists have hidden mathematical miracles in their theories, a whole series of miracles, and they don't have a miracle maker. Let's look at a fourth line of evidence, the origin of the DNA code. The DNA code is a sophisticated language system with letters and words. The meaning of the words is unrelated to the chemical properties of the letters, just as the information on a page is not a product of the chemical properties of the ink. All life is based on information, but information is not derived from matter itself. For example, chalk by itself does not inherently possess or create information. So if I write information on a chalkboard, where does the information come from? If I wipe off all the chalk, there is no information in the chalk dust itself. Information can always be traced back to an intelligent mind. So how could the information in a complex coding system like DNA have come into being without intelligent design? This is such a problem for the evolutionist that the Origin of Life Foundation wrote an article entitled, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?, dedicated to what biology professor Jack Travers calls the most pressing question in science, the origin of the genetic instructions in DNA. As Dr. Travers points out, the genetic instructions don't write themselves any more than software programs write themselves. Let's approach this problem from a different angle. Let's consider the genotype and phenotype. The genotype refers to all the genes present in the zygote, that is the fertilized egg. But not all these genes are actually expressed. The phenotype, on the other hand, refers to the trait that we actually see. In other words, the expressed gene, the way the gene has expressed itself. So, for example, the genotype would refer to the genes in the DNA molecule. The phenotype is the way those genes have expressed themselves. For example, brown eyes, brown hair, how tall or short the person is. The phenotype is what we actually see. We don't see the genotype because it is at the molecular level within the DNA molecule. Now, friends, natural selection can only operate at the level of the phenotype, never the level of the genotype. Let me give you an illustration. Let's say we have a short, fat man and a tall, lean man. They are both visiting the Kruger National Park. And a lion comes along, and this lion is a hungry lion and starts running after these two gentlemen. Who's going to be the loser? Who's going to be the winner? Well, of course, it is the short, fat man that is going to be killed by the lion. You see, the phenotype determines the situation. Through natural selection, short and fat is eliminated. Tall and lean survives. Natural selection works only at the level of the phenotype. It is not interested in the genotype. So what does work at the level of the genotype? How are genes changed over time? Not by natural selection, but by chance mutations. Well, how do mutations take place? Well, mutations are caused by some external factor, for example, radiation or some chemical, gamma radiation, which affects the gene sequence. It changes the gene sequence or destroys certain genes. Most mutations, 99% of mutations, are harmful, detrimental to the organism. We also need to remember that mutations are random, they take place by chance, and once they are expressed in the phenotype, only then can they be selected for. Now, friends, we need to remember that Charles Darwin lived from 1809 to 1882. And at the same time, Gregor Mendel, known as the father of modern genetics, was beginning to understand how inheritance took place. His law of segregation and independent assortment were only accepted at the turn of the 20th century, long after Darwin had passed away. So we need to remember that Darwin knew nothing about chromosomes, he knew nothing about genes, he knew nothing about DNA, he knew nothing about cell division, mitosis and meiosis. He knew nothing about genetics, nothing about the law of segregation or independent assortment. Indeed, he knew nothing about mutations. Let's look at an analogy. Let's say I want to build an aeroplane. So I would have a book of instructions. That is what we would refer to as the genotype. Once the aeroplane has been built, that is the phenotype. So the genotype, in the case of a living organism, the book of instruction is found in the sequence of genes in the DNA molecule. The phenotype is the way the genes have expressed themselves. That is what we actually see. Question: who wrote the book of instructions? Obviously, some intelligent designer. Now, in this specific example or analogy that we are looking at, who wrote the book of instructions? Well, the evolutionist would say chance. It came about purely by chance. Now, friends, that takes an incredible amount of faith to believe that all those instructions came about purely by chance. So let's play this game out. Let's assume that this book has come into existence purely by chance, by mutation. All the information for what I am going to build is in this book. So here I have my book of instructions. All the information about how to build my aeroplane is in this book. So let me take this book now and put it over here on the table. Now, friends, I'm going to wait for the aeroplane to appear. After all the information about the aeroplane is in that book. How long am I going to wait for the aeroplane to assemble itself? Well, friends, I will wait forever and ever and ever. You see, it is not enough for all the information to have come into existence by itself. If I don't have a mechanism that will translate all that information into an actual plane, then my plane will never appear. So my book by itself, even if it should come into existence by chance, is totally useless. What do I need to transcribe the information into an aeroplane? Well, friends, there are a number of things that I would need. I need an assembly line, a factory. I need someone to intelligently interpret what is inside the book of instructions. And I need workers or robots. Well, friends, the marvel of it all is that all these things are found at microscopic level in our cells. We have a marvelous system of messenger RNA, transfer RNA, and the protein factory itself, the ribosome. Question: how did the factories, the workers, and the design mechanisms come into existence that will eventually build my aeroplane? Friends, there are only two possibilities: either by intelligent design or by chance. Because remember, natural selection will only work once the aeroplane, the phenotype, is there. It is highly unlikely that all these complicated molecules and systems came about purely by chance. All the evidence is in favor of intelligent design.